थोडा वेळ लागतो.
थोडा
लाईव्ह ना?
एक 5 मिनिटं थांबा मग.
आय लेट यू नो सर, जस्ट अ मोमेंट.
आता 31 पार्टिसिपेंट दिसतात मला. 31.
हो, ते कीप ऑन ऍडिंग सर.
विद्यार्थी वाटले पाहिजे सर, विद्यार्थी.
चालू सर.
जर्नलचा
इम्पॅक्ट फॅक्टर असतो ना, तसं देशपांडे सर अटेंडीचा नंबर बघत असतात कायम, बरं का.
आता काय मला रोजच आहे हे, सध्या रोजच
आकडा, आजचा आकडा काय, पेशंटचा आकडा नसला तर अटेंडीचा आकडा काय, याच्यावरती सध्या हवा आहे.
पेशंट कधीच नव्हता आपल्याकडे आकडा, त्यामुळे आपलं काय ऐकणारी माणसं कमी उरली जातात.
तुमच्या टोटल सेशनचा आकडा कळाला आज आम्हाला, गेल्या काही महिन्यांमधला.
किती झालाय? 24,000 लोकांनी ऐकलं असं काही तुम्ही सांगितलं आहे. पियुषने सांगितलं परवा ईबीला की 24,000 लोकांनी ऍटलीस्ट ऑन तरी ठेवलं होतं. ऐकलं की नाही माहित नाही. 24,000 पीपल यू हॅव रीच असं त्यांनी सांगितलं.
बघा आनंद देशपांडे, सर्व आयपी मेंबर्सना माहिती आहे 24,000 स्ट्रेंथ आहे मेंबर्स स्ट्रेंथ.
माहिती की नाही, ऐकलंय की नाही माहिती नाही.
Piyush, are we live now?
Yes sir, we are.
So should we begin?
Yes sir, you can.
Right. So on behalf of Indian Academy of Pediatric Pune branch, I welcome all of you, the faculty and the PG students, as well as pediatricians for the 7th session of the PG clinical case discussion. Today we have a very interesting case being presented by Dr. Sarvesh from Armed Forces Medical College and is mentored by Dr. Sridhar from Armed Forces Medical College. And we have esteemed faculty today, Dr. Sudhir Sarodya sir from Kolhapur, Dr. Sandeep Kadam from KEM Hospital Pune, Dr. Anand Deshpande from Dinanath Hospital Pune, and Dr. Vaman Khadilkar, pediatric endocrinologist, will be joining us after a short while. So I think without wasting much time, I would like to start. I would like Sarvesh to start the case. Just before that, I would like to acknowledge the role of Rajesh Kulkarni and Uthiyu madam in doing all the logistics and arranging this activity regularly. So thank you Rajesh and Uthiyu ma'am. So I think Sarvesh, can you share the screen and begin?
Yes sir.
Right, we are seeing the screen. You can start.
Right, right sir. Good afternoon everyone. My patient.
Sarvesh, introduce yourself.
Sir, I'm Dr. Sarvesh.
Sarvesh, introduce yourself.
I'm Dr. Sarvesh. I'm second year PG resident at Armed Forces Medical College. So my patient, 5 months old male infant, is the second born of a non-consanguineous marriage, a resident of Panoli, Maharashtra. Informant being mother and reliability good, was brought to us with complaints of recurrent episodes of poor feeding, lethargy, and abnormal movements of the upper and the lower limbs and the eyes since the early neonatal period. Since the onset of complaints of my patient was from the early infancy, I would like to begin with the antenatal history. The infant was born to a 34 years old gravida 4 para 1 living 1 A2 mother at 38 weeks 3 days period of gestation. In the obstetric history, the first gravida was in 2010 was a 2.7 kg female neonate born at a term, presently 11 years old, alive and healthy and developmentally normal. The second gravida was a spontaneous abortion at 1.5 months of gestation, and the third gravida was a medical termination of pregnancy at 1.5 months. The mother was B positive. There was no history of pre-gestational or gestational diabetes mellitus, gestational hypertension, hypothyroidism, or other comorbidities. The serology for HIV, HBsAg, and syphilis was negative.
Just 1 minute, just revise once.
So, the infant was born to a 34 years old gravida for para 1 living 1, abortion 2 lady at 38 weeks 3 days period of gestation, sir. Okay. The first gravida was a female neonate who was presently 11 years old, alive and healthy, and was born at term, sir. The second and third gravida were abortions and medical termination of pregnancy at 1.5 months of gestation. And there was no history of pre-gestational or gestational diabetes mellitus, gestational hypertension, hypothyroidism, or any other comorbidities, with negative serology for HIV, HBsAg, and syphilis.
Okay. So up till now, till this baby uneventful, except for the one miscarriage.
Yes, sir, one spontaneous abortion in the second.
MTP.
So third was a medical termination of pregnancy. The second
Okay.
gravida was a spontaneous abortion. So
Okay, so one living child only.
yes, only one living child.
Male or female?
Female,
Okay.
sir. Female, 11 years old presently, developmentally normal.
Okay.
Shall I go ahead, sir?
Go ahead.
Yes. So the pregnancy was a product of a spontaneous conception. The mother was a booked case. In the first trimester, the pregnancy was detected by a urine pregnancy test and was confirmed by ultrasonography. The mother was started on folic acid supplements, and there was no history of fever, rash, vomiting, drug intake, or radiation exposure during the first trimester.
Okay.
Why did you ask history of fever and rash in this pregnancy?
So again, first trimester, history
So
of fever,
full term baby, right?
term babies. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So why is this history relevant in this pregnancy?
History is relevant because we need to rule out any history which would suggest towards torch infections that could cause like CMV and rubella. So congenital CMV and rubella can.
How does that relate to your presenting complaint?
So again, poor feeding lethargy, and that could be there. Congenital CMV can lead to a manifestation of intrauterine growth restrictions, and seizures. They can manifest with seizures in the early neonatal period.
Okay.
So just it is not related to the case, but folic acid preconceptionally and postconceptionally, what difference it makes?
So preconceptionally, folic acid.
No, just for the benefit of everybody, just talk on that.
Yes, folic acid supplementation is required to prevent neural tube defects. Preconceptionally, it is advised to be given mothers who had previous history of neural tube defects in pregnancy. So for them, it is advised to be given preconceptionally and at a higher dose. And post-conceptionally, again, it carries the risk that if the neural tube development has taken place by that time, then and the supplements have not been taken, they can manifest with neural tube defects.
Okay. So preconception is required for the neural tube, because on which day generally neural tube will start developing, good or bad?
Sorry, sir?
Day of conception, neural tube development generally develops.
So day 10 to 12.
What day of conception it starts developing, and what day it ends generally. End means it will end at the time of birth. The development will continuously go on, but it will have some sizable shape. During what day of conception?
Day 10 to 12, it starts
Okay.
developing, sir.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
In the second trimester, iron and calcium supplements were started. Quickening was felt at 5 months. The mother received 2 doses of injection tetanus toxoid. The anomaly scan showed no gross anomalies, and there was no history of leaking or bleeding per vaginum, fever, burning or painful micturition, or loose stools. In the third trimester, iron and calcium supplements were continued. The mother had regular antenatal visits. There was history of decreased liquor and inadequate fetal growth, which was observed during visits. And the mother was admitted with history of perception of decreased fetal movements at 36 weeks period of gestation. However, there was no history of leaking or bleeding per vaginum, fever, burning or painful micturition, or loose stools.
So anything to sum up, anything significant in the ANC period? Nothing.
So only during the third trimester, sir, that there was history of decreased liquor and inadequate fetal growth, sir. Along with a history of decreased fetal movement, sir. So,
okay.
Yes, sir.
When you say that there is decreased liquor,
Sir.
Was this oligohydramnios by any history that you could get? What is oligohydramnios?
So when on an AFI of less than 5, sir, or a largest pocket measuring in the vertical length less than 2 centimeters, sir.
Very good. So if we say that there was less liquor, what are the common things that you would ask in this pregnancy?
Sir, again, leaking.
What could be the reason for this oligohydramnios?
So leaking per vaginum can be one of the causes.
But you said there is, you yourself said there is
then
no history
renal-
of leak.
renal causes in the fetus, renal agenesis would lead to a decreased liquor. So then, again, congenital anomalies.
See, you said that there is decreased liquor and inadequate growth. What is the commonest cause that which could result in decreased liquor and inadequate growth?
So uteroplacental insufficiency.
Very
Yes.
good. So
Yes.
uteroplacental insufficiency.
Placental dysfunction.
So chronic uteroplacental insufficiency would give you oligohydramnios and less fetal growth.
Yes.
What history would you ask if you have chronic uteroplacental insufficiency resulting in intrauterine growth restriction in the mother?
So history of maternal hypertension, sir,
Yes.
chronic as well as gestational hypertension. Sir.
Very good. Anything else?
So then GD, so even pre-gestational diabetes mellitus can lead to vasculopathies, which can cause
So advanced diabetes, not
diabetes.
pre-gestational, isn't it?
Yes.
If you say
And
gestational diabetes, you would expect a big baby.
yes.
But if you say you have diabetes with vasculopathy, that is a advanced diabetes with vascular involvement, then you would get a small baby. Anything else which would give you chronic uteroplacental insufficiency?
Sir, then twin gestations or triplets, multiple gestations can.
Unless you have a twin-to-twin transfusion, otherwise no. What are the other things which give you less growth? Stress, maternal, isn't it? Chronic hypoxia, heart disease in mothers. See, Monica has written congenital intrauterine infections where there is velitis, there is decrease in the blood supply from the mother to the baby. Then rare disorders are connective tissue
Abnormal
disorders.
presentation.
Advanced maternal age. So when you are talking, Sarvesh, you are doing very well. You need to have whatever you are saying should have some explanation and some chain of thoughts that should come out in your history.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You're doing good. So you have a mother who was gravida 4, para 1, living 1 with 2 abortions. And this was a term pregnancy. And the baby had presented to you with lethargy and abnormal movements.
Yes.
And you said there was no history of any rash and fever. There was no history of anything to suggest apart from decreased liquor. And you said perception of decreased fetal movement.
Yes.
Is this history important at 36 weeks?
Decreased fetal movements, again, intrauterine hypoxia can cause decreased fetal movements in the. So it will be important because the perinatal outcomes could be affected by it.
Okay, so obviously this baby is at risk of having perinatal hypoxia or perinatal asphyxia. So two things that we have learned: there was less liquor, there was intrauterine fetal growth restriction, and there was decreased fetal movement. So these three things you have told us, which have got important antenatal bearing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Don't talk of renal dysplasia or renal dysgenesis because it is not very common. So renal agenesis is a cause of oligohydramnios, but it is not so very common. You can say last Potter syndrome.
Right.
Yeah. Can we go to the next slide?
Yes. The infant was born at 38 weeks, 3 days period of gestation, sir, by an emergency LSCS done in view of a post-LSCS status with decreased fetal movement, sir, with a birth weight of 2.47 kg. The baby cried immediately after birth and was roomed in with mother. Breastfeeding was initiated within the first hour.
So what do you make out of the birth weight and the gestation? You are happy with the birth weight?
So the birth weight as compared to the period of gestation, the infant is the neonate is lying at coming out to be as a small for gestational age, sir.
So
It's-
is this a low birth weight?
Low birth weight.
Okay. So
So, Dr. Sarvesh, this is Dr. Khadilkar. I have a question for you.
Yes.
You have mentioned about birth weight.
Yes.
Do you think any other parameter at birth is very important when it comes to SGA?
Sir, the OFC would be important at birth, sir.
Okay. Anything else?
Because and length, sir.
Yeah. So, do you have the birth length?
So, sorry, sir. No, sir. No, I don't, sir.
See, this highlights the biggest flaw in Indian pediatrics. We all are absolute masters of science, but don't take basic things. I think taking a basic length would have helped tremendously in understanding of an SGA baby. So please, I urge all of you to get into a habit of taking birth length, because you can only classify SGA based on birth length, head circumference, and weight. Just taking weight in isolation, and this bad practice sadly continues throughout pediatricians' life, that they fail to take length or height of a child. So please, from your PG days, get into a habit of measuring length as well as weight. And of course, when the children are up to 3 years of age, head circumference. So while I'm on this subject, may I ask you, what is the difference between SGA and IUGR?
So small for gestation age is basically less than 10 centile for that gestation age. The weight for that gestation age is less than 10 centile. IUGR is a clinical diagnosis, sir, where the fetus is enabled to achieve the...
Sarvesh, tell me what the antenatally the Doppler was done, and tell along with Dr. Khadilkar sir's question. My question is how to differentiate between IUGR baby and a small baby of small mother. This is a common problem here in India. There is a small baby of a small mother, low weight mother. Mother is hardly 42 kg or 45 kg, and baby is 2.2. So whether you call it as a IUGR or whether it is a SGA, so sir is asking the same question.
So to determine IUGR, sir, we have to during the fetal monitoring, sir, we have to check the growth velocity of that child, sir. Now, for that, we have to we can classify them into early if we are doing antenatal screening for fetal growth restrictions, sir. We have to classify them into before 32 weeks without any congenital anomalies, into early FGR, and after 32 weeks without any congenital anomalies, into late FGR, sir. Then the estimated fetal weight oblique abdominal circumference, if it is less than the third centile, or there is absent and diastolic flow, sir.
So primarily IUGR, known as intrauterine growth restriction. So that means the velocity of growth is less. So it's a measure over a period of time that you are taking, whereas SGA is like a snapshot. So you may have a small for gestational baby who is lightweight or short in length or both. So remember that IUGR or intrauterine growth restriction is like a video versus SGA is like a snapshot. So a single time reading, you can speak of SGA. So what Dr. Deshpande was coming to is that IUGR can be SGA, IUGR cannot be SGA, SGA can be IUGR, or SGA cannot be IUGR. So you have 4 permutation combinations. So remember that you shouldn't mix up these two. What you get at birth is just a single point estimation of birth weight and length. Therefore, you call it SGA. So SGA may not necessarily be IUGR, but if there is an IUGR, it may actually be a slightly more severe condition than your SGA alone, depending on.
Like in postnatal growth, we always see at the both parents and have considered them in the growth. Similarly, intrauterine also we have to look. This is a broader view because it is maternal constitution is going to affect on the baby.
Yes, that is very true. It's like a small, what is known as the.
So you cannot put them on the chart and say every time. You have to consider the if 45 kilo or 43 kilo mother is very common in Indian scenario.
Intrauterine, see, there is this uterine constraint which has been, as Dr. Deshpande is saying, defined very many years ago, that if a 6-foot American man marries a 4.5-foot Indian lady, then the baby who is born is going to be small because the uterus will not allow growth beyond a point to which the baby will not be delivered. But when the baby is born, then there is a catch up in the first 2 years to the mid-parental height. So this is the important concept, and that you all must understand. Rather than, as Dr. Deshpande said, broader view, don't just look at the charts and don't just look at what is described in the books, but take the holistic picture. You may have a small mother and a small baby who may eventually catch up if the father is tall or if there is a genetic potential to grow. So my point was that please get into a habit of taking length and accordingly analyze your SGA babies. So please move on. Please move on.
In the postnatal period, the child was on breastfeeds along with formula feeds and was feeding well till day 3 of life. When the mother noticed the child to have poor feeding and lethargy on day 3, which was followed by uprolling of eyes for 5 minutes, followed by generalized bluish discoloration of the body approximately 30 minutes later, in view of which the child was shifted to the neonatal intensive care unit, where the child was found to have low blood sugar, low oxygen saturation levels at room air, and was started on IV fluids along with supplemental oxygen by nasal cannula.
After how many time the baby developed these symptoms? Feeding history prior to uploading of IVAL.
Yes, it was on day 3, sir. When the mother was trying to feed the baby, the mother found that the child was not feeding well and was lethargic, sir. It was after that only. The previous feed the mother had given, but after that, when the mother was trying to give the next feed, she found that the baby was lethargic. And this followed by uprolling of eyes lasting for approximately 5 minutes. And bluish discoloration of skin, which was not initially noticed by the mother, was noticed by a bystander, and then the mother was made aware.
Baby was on the sugar monitoring?
No, sir.
It was not on the sugar monitoring because by looking at the history of IUGR or low weight, less than 2.5 kg, baby was entitled to undergo sugar screening.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So the child was shifted to the NICU where the child was started on IV fluids and supplemental oxygen. The child received IV antibiotics for 10 days and was gradually weaned off IV fluids and started on nasogastric / orogastric feeds and subsequently developed to bottle feeds. At discharge, the child was restarted on regular breastfeeds.
Septic screen negative.
Sir, actually, in the history, the mother was not able to tell whether the sepsis screen was positive or negative, sir. This was an outborn baby, sir. This had come to us at 5 months of age only, sir. So, in the history, mother could
not. That's not the problem. But as baby was admitted in NICU,
yes,
so but antibiotics were given on a hot basis, no?
So they were suspecting sepsis. That is why they had given antibiotics. Sir, they had told the parents this only, that the sugar was less and they were suspecting
and
sepsis.
sugar didn't trouble in the NICU. It was easily managed by the normal drips.
Yes, sir.
So once one single attack of hypoglycemia in overall total history, initially during the NICU stay, or there were multiple, or
no,
was
sir.
not tested at all.
No, so it was tested, but there was just one episode.
Thereafter, once the patient was on IV fluid and
IV fluids did not have hypoglycemia.
Okay.
So whether it is recorded or not recorded, that's very important.
Sir, actually, the mother was not able to tell what were the further sugar values. Sir. But
usually in such case, you will get access to the discharge card of the NICU.
Discharge card will be mentioned, no?
Sir, in the discharge summary, it was the sugar which was written was initial sugar was 27, sir, but after that there was no episode of hypoglycemia which was recorded. So after that the sugars were like 80 and 70, sir, on IV fluids.
Okay. Okay, so there is only single documented hypoglycemia episode during the
First one, yes, sir.
And when the baby went on feeding again,
Yes, sir.
went on feeding when? Immediately after going to NICU, next day baby was put on the
No,
breast?
no, sir. Sir, the baby was initially on IV fluids for approximately 48 hours. Sir. After that, they started gradually weaning off the IV fluids and started NG or OG, oblique OG feeds. Almost day 5th of NICU admission, they had started bottle feeds. Sir. And by the time of discharge, sir, they had started breastfeeds. Sir. So almost 10 to 11 days of NICU admission history was there. Sir.
But was the baby looking sick to the mother? She must be visiting the NICU. No?
So initially she could not
single
visit.
episode hypoglycemia, the baby will not be looking sick and will be looking well when the baby mother is visiting the NICU.
Sir, actually the issue with this baby initially was the baby was born at a service hospital, but the pediatrician was not available at that point of time. So the baby was shifted to another hospital in civil. The mother was still admitted at the hospital only, sir, and the caregiver who was the grandmother of the baby was visiting the baby.
Okay, understood.
A 3-day child, a neonate collapsing on day 3 without specific risk factor. What are the various causes or etiological possibilities?
So early onset neonatal sepsis would be one of the possibilities, sir. Then congenital heart disease, critical congenital heart disease, specifically duct-dependent lesions could be another possibility.
Then what is the third one?
So inborn errors of metabolism could be the third.
Great.
Sarvesh, you have a baby who was a term low birth weight baby, and the baby presented to you on day 3 with lethargy and 1 episode of seizure, right? And this was a mother who was a 34-year-old mother.
Yes, sir.
From these things, you said that the baby did have low blood sugar just when the baby had seizure. What things probably make you feel that what could be the underlying cause which was responsible for this, number one? And number two, do you think that there is something which is beyond that, or we should be thinking about metabolic disorders, or whether we should be thinking of infections, or whether we should be thinking of some underlying disorder, or it is just that it was a simple transitional hypoglycemia that we were looking at?
Sir, it could have been a
transitional. No, okay. What is the transitional hypoglycemia, first of all?
So transitional hypoglycemia in high-risk cases like small for gestational age, large for gestational age, IUGR babies, and babies born to infants of diabetic mother, or those with gestational diabetes mellitus, they are at increased risk of hypoglycemia in the early neonatal period, that is up to 48 to 72 hours. So by that time, the counter-regulatory mechanisms should develop and the baby should not have hypoglycemia. But during this period, the child can have hypoglycemia, sir, primarily because of decreased stores and inability or immaturity of the baby to do gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, sir. Because of that, it stays. But if it persists to stay beyond 7 days, or the requirement of IV insulin is more than 12 mg per kg.
No, we are not going into those details as of now.
See, transitional is not doesn't extend to the 3rd day. Right? Transitional generally means the first 6 hours, which is present in our normal. 10% of normal babies will have transitional hypoglycemia.
So this was a symptomatic hypoglycemia with hypoglycemic seizure, correct?
Yes, sir.
Typically presenting on day 3. Why do you think of sepsis as your first differential diagnosis? Because you specifically said that there was no history of any leaking, chorioamnionitis, loose motions, UTI. You have ruled out all the maternal risk factors which could have been responsible for early onset sepsis.
Sure. So, but in a tropical setup in a country like ours, with the resource, though it was an institutional study, but the chances of sepsis in the environment are there, and inborn errors.
And Or is it that baby received 10 days of antibiotics and you said that your first differential diagnosis is early onset sepsis?
No, sir.
Okay.
There is history of lethargy and poor feeding now.
So history of
Baby is
lethargy.
lethargic and lethargy and
can
poor
it-
feeding goes in favor of hypoglycemia.
Sorry, sir.
And secondary to sepsis.
Dr. Sarvesh, can sepsis and hypoglycemia coexist?
Yes, sir.
And what inborn, if is it possible to have inborn error and hypoglycemia also,
Yes, sir.
and
Yes.
sepsis with that?
Sorry, sir.
Which inborn errors will have hypoglycemia? Which inborn errors commonly will cause?
Galactosemia, sir, can manifest as hypoglycemia, sir. Then, so
And will that have sepsis?
that can have, sir, E. coli. That can have sepsis with E. coli, sir.
Yeah, so even that combination needs to be kept in mind.
Yes.
It doesn't
So
have to be either or.
in short, hypoglycemia is like a fever. It is a manifestation of so many diseases.
Yeah.
It is a common manifestation of multiple diseases.
Yes. Shall I go ahead, sir?
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
So at 3 months of age, the mother again noticed the child to have bluish discoloration of lips, lethargy, and the child was unresponsive while feeding. The child was taken to a hospital immediately where he was found to have low blood sugar and was again managed in the NICU for 6 hours with IV fluids, which were continued for the next 24 hours. The child improved clinically and was restarted on breastfeeds, and the child was discharged on day 3 on breastfeeds along with formula feeds and supplement vitamin D3.
So in between, was the weight gain all right?
Yes, so the mother said that the child was gaining weight adequately in between, sir.
So this was a well child who all of a
Yes,
sudden
yes,
developed
Went into the same NICU. Went into the same NICU.
No, sir. No, sir. This time they had gone to the service hospital, sir.
Okay.
Okay. So a well child suddenly developing hypoglycemia
Sir.
with
And
one episode of
What is the
hypoglycemia.
development in between? Development,
So developmentally, the child was attaining the developmental milestones normally.
social smile.
The social
was
smile was
there.
present. Yes, sir. The social smile was present by that point of time, sir.
Sarvesh, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
The 3-month hypoglycemia,
Sir.
was it related to feeding? Was it related to not being fed and then developed lethargy, or was it after feeding? And what is the importance of feeding history and development of symptoms which are related to this?
Yes. Sir, actually, in this case, the mother was not very confidently able to tell about the temporal association of hypoglycemia with and the symptoms with the feeding time. Most of the time, she said that it was the episodes were happening by the time the child was to be refed, sir. But she was never convincingly saying whether the episode started after feeding, sir. So most of the both the times, sir, it was just about the time for the next feed when the child had these symptoms. And regarding the second question, sir, the temporal association is the association of symptoms with feeding is important, sir, because if in metabolic disorders and inborn errors of metabolism, sir, it is the fasting which manifests with the hypoglycemic events, whereas if it is congenital hyperinsulinism, these symptoms would manifest after the feed is given, sir.
So if you have a baby who is, say, not given feed for 6-8 hours and then develops symptoms which are related to hypoglycemia,
yes, sir.
which are the conditions that you are thinking about?
So then again,
suppose a baby sleeps in the night and doesn't wake up in the night for any feed, and early morning the child develops bluish discoloration.
So what was the timing? In this case, what was the timing of the hypoglycemia? Do you know?
You may not know that.
Evening.
But if you have a baby who is not given feed in the night and the baby develops symptoms in the early morning hours, and the baby has a documented hypoglycemia,
yes,
what are conditions that you are thinking about?
Fatty acid oxidation defects can manifest with the hypoglycemia if there are prolonged periods of.
Anything else?
What what is a ketotic hypoglycemia?
When you don't get glucose, what are the various
Ketotic
substrates which are
hypoglycemia.
converted
Ketones.
into glucose?
Ketones, lactic acid, and pyruvate
See, my question
are the
is when
alternative
you,
fuels for.
Sarvesh, when you don't get glucose,
Yes, sir.
what are the various sources which are getting converted into glucose?
So basically, free fatty acid get
So you
converted
have,
into glycerol.
okay, so one is fats, second
Fats, sir. Proteins, sir.
glycogen,
Glycogen, sir.
and third proteins.
Amino acid.
So if you have a disorder where glycogen is not being converted into glucose, does that present with hypoglycemia? The answer is yes. And is it fasting? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You said about fat. The fatty acid oxidation or
Oxidation defect.
they will again present as fasting hypoglycemia
Fasting
after a long time. Okay. And third thing is protein metabolic disorders. Again, gluconeogenetic defects. They will again present with hypoglycemia once you don't feed the babies for long duration. Versus if I have a baby wherein I give feed and the baby develops hypoglycemia in an hour's time, what are the conditions you are trying to see?
So hyperinsulinemic states would be the possibility, sir. Congenital
Okay, now
hyper-
here,
Do you
here
feel
you
that
said that this baby was managed within 6 hours and the baby became euglycemic.
Yes, sir.
Does that go in favor of hyperinsulinemia?
No, sir. Little unlikely, sir.
Okay, so what is more likely then? Because these are transient episodes of hypoglycemia which don't require a fairly high dextrose concentration. So that is something which is taking.
See, Sarvesh, what Dr. Sandeep is trying to come to is there is a very systematic method in which glucose is regulated. And when you are in a fasting state, for the first 2 hours, it is your stored glycogen that gets actually broken down into glucose. So glycolysis is the main mechanism in the first 2 to 3 hours after fasting. Followed by that, there is gluconeogenesis that continues for 6 to 8 hours, sometimes up to 10 hours. And beyond that, it is your ketone body generation, breaking down of fats. So what he's trying to ask you is, what is the time interval between feeding and the hypoglycemia so that you can have a rough estimate of where is the defect? That's the fundamental question he's asking. So here it appears to me that this is either a defect in the glycolysis or neoglucogenesis rather than a fatty acid oxidation defect based on the timing that you are presenting, provided that your history that was narrated to you was correct. So yeah, carry on.
Then again, at 4 months, the child was brought to the hospital with history of an episode of excessive crying, abnormal jerky movements of the right upper and the lower limb, lasting for 10 to 15 minutes, followed by a vacant stare and unresponsiveness, looseness of the limbs, and excessive crying. The child was again taken to the hospital where the child was documented to have low blood sugar and was again managed with IV fluids initially. Breastfeeding was started gradually, and monitoring of blood glucose was done at the hospital.
So again, you are not giving the timing when it is occurring. Then we are not giving the what is happening to the growth in between of the child. What has happened from the birth to 4 months milestones you are not providing. These are going to be vital things for the going further.
And duration of excessive crying after feeding. Less of the feeding history.
No, the excessive crying started before the feed only, sir.
Before scheduled feeding. Before
Obviously, this was again a symptomatic seizure that the child had at 4 months of age. But what was different in this time compared to the last 2 episodes?
So the seizure had motor manifestations this time, sir, which were not there previous.
And they were more localized, isn't it?
Yes,
right upper limb and lower limbs.
Sir.
Was it only right lower limb or both lower limbs?
Both right upper and lower limbs.
Okay. So this was a symptomatic seizure or a convulsion which the baby showed And again, this time probably baby had low sugar.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Sarvesh,
So
this time
was there
what
any
was the
diabetic?
feeding?
Sorry, Dr. Kulkarni, you carry on. Yeah, sorry.
So this time, what is the temporal association between feeding and these symptoms of excessive crying and jerky movements?
Sir, again, it was before feed only, sir.
Before feed. So when was the last feed? Rather, I would ask, was it 3 hours before, 1 hour before, 2 hours before?
No, sir, it was approximately 2 to 2.5 hours before this feed, sir.
Right. Okay.
Is
So
there
next-
any diabetic in the
breastfeed?
family?
Sir,
Is there any diabetic in the family?
no, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
Exclusively breastfed?
Yes, sir. Actually, on the last discharge, they had advised for the formula feed as well, sir.
Okay.
So again, the mother could not elicit any temporal association of the symptoms with the timing of feeds. The child was continued on breastfeeds with 30 ml additional formula feeds given too early at the hospital, and was discharged with the advice to follow up at a higher center for further evaluation. There was no history of recurrence of seizures since the last episode till the time the child presented to us in the hospital.
So nobody in the last two hypoglycemic events, nobody took a critical lab there.
No, sir.
Every
Sarvesh,
time they treated the patient and didn't collect any lab. Okay.
No.
Sarvesh, this was a 34-year-old mother. Did
Yes.
anybody elicit history about adequacy of breastfeeding? Because see, as the age becomes more than 30, breast milk supply, whether she was feeding well, what was the milk adequate, what was the urine output, how much time was the baby feeding on the breast, was it half an hour, 45
Yes.
minutes? I mean, all these things have to be
Yeah.
asked in the history. Did you get a history of eliciting adequacy of breastfeeding or breast milk?
Weight
Sir,
gain.
yes.
Weight
Yes,
gain.
sir,
You
that-
have not mentioned about weight gain.
Sir. So the breastfeeding history was taken. The mother was feeding adequately and was feeding every 2 hourly.
But do you expect a normal term baby to get 2 hourly feeds?
Sir, 2
Especially
to 3.
3 and 4 months.
So not at 3 months, sir, because the nighttime feeding usually gets
So obviously,
slightly.
if the mother is feeding too early or the baby is crying for milk too early, that in itself tells you that the milk supply probably was inadequate. Because if a baby is feeding well, the baby should sleep for 3 to 4 hours. I mean,
Yes.
When it presented to you, what was the weight? Again, you don't have the figures of the weight for every admission.
Sir,
Or
I'll
you
be
don't
bringing
know.
out,
You have not taken.
sir, I'll be bringing out the
Every
weight in
admission
the
must be having a
examination.
weight on it. Weight on the admission discharge. Hey.
Sir, I'll be bringing out the weight in the examination part, sir, at admission, sir.
Not only weight, we need head circumference also.
I'll bring out all the
Because-
details in the.
no.
Okay.
See, Sarvesh,
Because
what
head
we are
circumference
trying,
will give us brain growth.
Sarvesh, what we are
Brain
trying
growth,
to
brain
elicit.
growth.
Sorry, sir. Sarvesh, what we are trying to elicit just on the basis of history is on history can we come to a diagnosis rather than seeing the baby. And we don't want to take investigations in your examination.
Yes.
Yeah, carry on, please carry on.
Right. So the mother also gave history of poor fixing and following to visual stimuli. However, there was no difficulty in latching or feeding, no history of drooling of milk or facial asymmetry or nasal regurgitation. There was no history of non-responsiveness to verbal or auditory stimuli, no history of tightness of limbs or any abnormal posturing. There was no history of vomiting, abnormal body odor, or aggravation of symptoms by intercurrent illnesses. There was no history of abdominal distension. There was no history of abnormal discoloration of the skin and no history of jaundice or pale colored stools.
So,
Should I go back?
no, it is all right. So only important symptom is unable to fix.
Yes, sir. That the mother said that the child was not following whenever they had showed some bright object or toy very well.
What would that indicate, Dr. Sarvesh?
So visual impairment is a known complication of hypoglycemic events. That hypoglycemia primarily affects the occipital lobes of the brain and can affect the visual pathways.
Right. Go ahead.
So in the developmental history, in the gross motor milestones, the child was able to roll over. In the fine motor milestones, the child was able to grasp a rattle with both the hands. The child was cooing, and in the socio-adaptive milestones, the child was showing interest in the surrounding and was able to turn the head when called. The approximate developmental age was 4 to 5 months. So in the family history, there was no history of significant illnesses in the family here, and the child was a second child of a non-consanguineous marriage. In the nutrition history, at presentation, the child was on breastfeeds along with the formula feeds 30 ml given too early. And in the socioeconomic history, the child belonged to upper middle class as per modified Kuppaswamy scales. So to summarize, my patient is a 5-month-old male infant with the recurrent episodes of lethargy, overfeeding, abnormal movements of the right upper and lower limbs and eyes, possibly focal seizures with the hypoglycemia.
Would you like to add something to this summary?
So with the visual
The
impairments.
recurrent episodes, but in between, how is he?
Normal, so in between he's
Is that important?
yes, sir.
Development near normal. Development near normal.
Yeah. And
Developmentally, he's near
and
normal.
it seems that there is
Yes,
no
yes,
intercurrent illness, or there is no particular thing that is predisposing to this hypoglycemia. Isn't it? Even that, I think, would be important here.
And weight record.
So I'm coming to this. So on admission, sir, the vitals were stable. The temperature was 98.4 degree Fahrenheit. The heart rate was 102 per minute regular. The peripheral pulses were well felt. The respiratory rate was 32 per minute, abdominal thoracic. The BB was 68 by 36 mm of Hg. The saturations at room air were 98%, and the capillary refill time was less than 3 seconds. The weight of the child was 5,200 grams, which was falling between -2 to -3 Z scores.
Age. What is the age?
This was at 5 months. This was at 5 months at presentation, sir.
5 completed? 5 going on, 5 completed, exact.
No, so 5 completed months, sir. So the head circumference was 39.5 centimeters, which was again between -2 to -3 Z scores. The length was 62 centimeters, sir, which was between -1 to -2 Z scores. The weight for length was falling between -2 to -3 Z scores. And the anterior fontanelle was 1 centimeter into 1 centimeter and was at level, sir. In the interpretation of the anthropometry, sir, the child was underweight and had moderate acute malnutrition, sir.
Important is occipital circumference.
Yes, sir. It is between -2 to -3 Z score. It does not qualify for microcephaly as of now, so it's still above -3 Z score.
But it indicates brain growth is impaired.
Yes, sir.
But baby has doubled the weight by 4 to 5 months. So by that criteria, will you call it as a failure to thrive?
Not failure to thrive. No, sir, not failure to thrive, sir. But the baby does fall into the category for underweight, sir.
Yeah, there are 2 comments on that. See, when you use WHO growth charts in a third world country like India, 30 to 50% of all your babies will be
That is a big problem, actually.
will be actually just on your third percentile, which is -2 Z score, just above or just below. So following the trend, what Dr. Anand Deshpande is trying to tell you is baby has doubled the birth weight. So if you look at the trend of this baby, the baby will actually be running parallel to the -2 Z score, although it will be just below the -2 Z score. So that trend is very important when it comes to using WHO growth charts in India. This is observation done by many people around the world, not only in India, but there are 67 countries who have reported that on WHO growth charts in the first few months up to a year, your patient may be around the third percentile only, which is -2 Z-score, but will be growing parallel to that. So that trajectory is very important. So if you would have shown us the growth chart by plotting the birth weight and the work weight at 5 months, it would have made a lot more sense. Also, that head circumference, there are 2 studies published on Indian children, normal Indian children with head circumference, and they are actually below the WHO's -2 Z-score. Many of them are actually running between -2 and 50th percentile. So even Indian head circumference requires much more national data before we can comment on whether that head circumference is abnormal in the first place. So I think a trajectory, I would once again insist that if you would have shown us a chart of trajectory, we would have been able to make much more sense than this alone. Wow. And last comment, Sarvesh, last comment, if you go to WHO website, WHO actually does not recommend the use of acute malnutrition, severe and moderate below 6 months of age. Severe acute malnutrition and moderate acute malnutrition are terminologies reserved by WHO after 6 months. So be careful when you use that.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely well said, Vaman. This is a common problem, and we are many times we are labeling SAM to non-SAM people, because you have you made it clear. That is a very good thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Anand. Please carry on.
Yes. So on head-to-toe examination, there was no pallor, icterus, cyanosis, clubbing lymphadenopathy, or edema. There were no dysmorphic features in the form of midfacial hypoplasia. There was no cleft lip, palate, or a micropenis. There was no large tongue hemihypertrophy or hyperpigmented lesions over the face. There was no hyperpigmentation. There were no inverted nipples or abnormal fat distribution.
What is significance of micropenis?
So again, hypopituitarism can lead to micropenis. So that could be a cause for the hypoglycemia as well.
How to see for the penile length?
So stretched penile length is to be measured, sir, from the root of the penis till the glans.
And when you call it as a micropenis at birth?
So less than 2.5 centimeters.
Okay.
Just a small comment on that. By definition, micropenis is defined as -2.5 Z-score for that particular gestation and that particular age. But yes, as a ballpark figure, I think less than -2.5 is okay for a term infant. For a preterm infant, the levels are going to be different. And you did mention about growth hormone deficiency because it is associated with hypoglycemia. But please remember, hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism will also present with isolated micropenis at this age. So carry on. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, on examination of the central nervous system, the child was alert, active, and playful. The child was cooing. In the cranial nerve examination, both the pupils were equal, 4 mm, and reacting to light. There were normal conjugate eye movements which were present. However, there were poor fixing and following to visual stimuli which was noticed. The fundus was normal. There was no facial asymmetry. The child was responding to auditory stimuli from both the sides. The uvula was central and there was good suck and swallowing. There was no nasal regurgitation or no drooping of shoulders.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Just like micropenis, uvula and hypoglycemia. Any comment? Difficult question. See, bifid uvula is often associated with a bifid pituitary and hypopituitarism. Also, absence of uvula or a posterior cleft palate can be associated with pituitary deficiency. So I am very, very delighted that you mentioned uvula. Only thing is, this is the significance of that. Yeah.
Midline defects, sir. So we can call all these midline defects.
Yes. Yeah. Please carry on.
Go back just one. Anything important that any positive points? No, poor fixing.
There was poor fixing and following to visual stimuli. So the child was not able to fix to.
Was there searching nystagmus?
No, sir.
Okay.
Dr. Sarvesh, you asked about abnormal fat distribution. Rather, you looked for it and
Yes.
widely spaced nipples. Why did you look for it?
So So congenital disorders of glycosylation, the abnormal fat pad distribution and inverted nipples are
Right.
associated.
CDG, yes.
So the bulk was normal in all the 4 limbs. The tone was normal in the limbs and trunk, both the active as well as the passive tone. The adductor angle was 90 degrees. The popliteal angle was also 90 degrees. The dorsiflexion angle was 70 degrees, and this in the scar sign, the elbow could reach only till the midline. Anti-gravity movements were present in all the 4 limbs, which counted for a power of more than 3/5. So the dependent reflexes were normal, and the bilateral plantars were flexor. There was no nystagmus or titubation. The sensory system examination could not be done in this child, and the spine was normal. So, the primitive neonatal reflexes like Moro's reflex, asymmetric tonic neck reflex were absent. Sir.
So, Sarvesh, do you think this baby had a normal examination finding?
Sir?
Do you think the baby had a normal neurological examination?
Sir, except for the visual impairment, rest of the part, yes.
Did you examine the sutures of this child? Though you mentioned about head circumference.
Sir.
Did you mention about the suture?
I mentioned about the fontanelle, but not the sutures specifically.
Is it important? How do we know that this baby who had a symptomatic neonatal hypoglycemic seizure has got normal brain growth and normal development? Because though we mentioned about developmental milestones, is the baby really doing well? Because we don't have a birth head circumference. We have a head circumference at 5 months, which was 39.5 centimeters, which you have mentioned.
Sir.
Was the child going for the object? Was the child having a positive supportive reaction? These are the things which will let us know whether the child is neurologically doing well. By 5 months, the child should have good head holding, reasonably good head holding. You should comment on that. So that will give you idea about the tone and everything together. Was the child laughing aloud? Other than vision, all other sectors where it is doing well, or it was a global delay. That what we want to know.
So the child did not have a developmental delay either in the motor or the language or social adaptive milestones. So he was.
That's what.
Was it going for the object? Was a positive supportive reaction was there or not?
To label a 5-month-old child a normal baby, it needs a lot of time.
Yes.
Because at 5 months, does the child on auxiliary suspension, does he bear weight on his lower limbs? Has the ATNR disappeared?
Yes.
Voluntary grasp is there or not? Voluntary goes
no,
for
sir.
the,
No, sir. Primitive. No, sir. The palmar grasp was not there, sir.
Voluntary grasp, no, not grasp reflex. Voluntary child goes for the object or not at 5 months.
Sir, when the child was given an object, the child was holding the object. So yes, voluntary grasp was present.
Going for the object, or going given in the hand, it was holding. Given in the hand, it was holding is different, and going for the object is different.
Sir, he was going for the object, sir. When an object was presented,
laughing aloud.
No, so he was cooing only at that point of time, so not laughing aloud, sir.
So definitely it's not normal. How can you call it normal? Laughing aloud is 4 months milestone.
Sir.
Okay, go ahead.
So, on examination of the abdomen, sir, on inspection, the abdomen was scaphoid in shape and flanks were not full. The umbilicus was central and inverted. There were no visible scars, veins, or pulsations. On superficial palpation, the abdomen was soft, non-tender. There was no guarding rigidity or distension, and there was no organomegaly. On percussion, the dullness of upper border of liver was percussed in the right fourth intercostal space, and the liver span was 5 centimeters. There was no free fluid, And on auscultation, the bowel sounds were present and there was no audible bruit.
What are the examination findings that you wanted to do on the abdominal examination which had a bearing on your clinical diagnosis?
So we have to look for organomegaly, specifically to say hepatomegaly would be one of the positive findings if it was a storage disorder, let's say a glycogen
Very
storage
good.
disorder, or for that matter, a fatty acid oxidation defects also could have hepatomegaly. Sir. Even galactosemia, if we were suspecting, can have, but in a well child, it would be a little unlikely. And
Anything else?
Umbilical hernia.
Umbilical hernia. Yeah.
yes, sir.
Why?
In this
What-
case, umbilical hernia was not present.
Why?
So
why?
what does it indicate? If there is an umbilical hernia with hypoglycemia, tell me two disorders.
Hypothyroidism.
Okay, and Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome. Okay,
Next.
carry on.
In the examination of the cardiovascular system, there were no visible precordial pulsations. The apex beat was felt in the left fourth intercostal space, a 0.5 centimeter lateral to the left mid-clavicular line. There was no palpable thrill or heave, and the S1 and S2 were heard normal. There was no murmur. And the respiratory examination, they were...
What was the cardiovascular findings that you were trying to see which were important from your clinical problem or clinical diagnosis of hypoglycemia, and why?
Sir, again, infants for this case, sir,
This case.
cardiomyopathies can be associated with the
Which syndrome it is associated with?
glycogen storage disorder, sir.
Which out of that there may be
GSD type 1, sir. GSD type 1, sir.
So one with cardiomyopathy which is involving glycogen, does it cause hypoglycemia?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Yes, sir. GSD type 1, type 3, and type 6 can cause hypoglycemia.
So, but do they cause cardiomyopathy? You get to cardiomyopathy in Pompe's disease. Does it cause hypoglycemia?
Yes.
Yes. Or you want to check?
So Pompe's causes hypoglycemia, sir.
Any other condition that you are thinking when you are looking at cardiovascular examination?
So, mitochondrial disorders can.
Which mitochondrial disorders will give you hypoglycemia, which is intermittent? And which gets corrected within 6 hours? Sarvesh, think of common problems in common and use your common sense. When you talk of rare things and rarities, your examiners are not going to like it.
The fatty acid oxidation defects.
Okay. So when you are talking of a cardiac examination, if it was a newborn, you would obviously see for an infant of a diabetic mother where there could be a cardiac involvement and asymmetrical septal hypertrophy, or a congenital heart defects like ASDs and VSDs, which can present with neonatal hypoglycemia. A big baby versus a baby who is having cardiomyopathy, you would think of fatty acid oxidation defects, which are rare, which are not very common, which are hypoglycemias, which are seen after fasting for a long period of time, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Go to your respiratory examination.
So in the respiratory examinations, there were bilateral vesicular breath sounds which were present, and air entry was equal on both sides, and there were no adventitious sounds in the form of wheezes or crackles. The respiratory examination.
It was normal examination, right?
Normal examination, yes, sir.
Yeah, good.
So to summarize, I have a 5-month-old male infant with episodes with history of recurrent episodes of symptomatic hypoglycemia. visual impairment with a normal tone and no dysmorphic features and no organomegaly.
So has your examination made you wiser than the history?
Sir, it has not added very significantly to the history, sir. It is just that we've been able to establish that the child has visual impairments.
So what were the relevant examination findings which
sir,
in your head? Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So the absence of dysmorphic features, specifically to say midfacial hypoplasia and cleft lips or cleft palate, again kind of helps us in ruling out hypopituitarism.
So you have ruled out midline defects, isn't it?
Midfacial defects.
Okay. Anything else in your examination which you have ruled out?
So again, absence of an organomegaly, hepatomegaly, sir, helps us rule out.
So you have ruled out significant storage problem.
Storage disorders, yes, sir.
Yeah. What have you ruled out? There is no cataract, you said, right? Because you could see the fundus. So what have
Yes,
you
sir.
ruled out?
Galactosemia.
Yeah.
Galactosemia,
Galactosemia.
nuclear cataract.
You said there is no cleft and there is no nystagmus. The head is normal in shape. So what have you ruled out? You have ruled out.
There was no
malformation.
icterus. There was no icterus anytime.
No, sir. No icterus. No, sir. No, sir. The child never had jaundice.
So based on your history and clinical examination, where are you in terms of the underlying cause of these 3 episodes of recurrent hypoglycemia, which are severe, which got corrected within 24 hours?
Sir, with the
Is it a recurrent hypoglycemia or a resistant hypoglycemia?
I'm sorry, sir.
It is a resistant hypoglycemia or a recurrent hypoglycemia?
It's a recurrent hypoglycemia, sir.
Okay. So 3 episodes causing the visual damage looks, which were according to you, which were promptly treated.
Sir, three episodes which were asymptomatic, sir. If there was underlying hypoglycemia which did not manifest symptomatically, then
Okay.
that could be a cause for.
Okay.
Just based on these
But
findings.
there is no developmental delay.
So, sorry, sir.
No developmental delay.
No significant developmental delay till this point of time.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that. Yeah. Because you are not given in detail the milestones.
Sarvesh, just based on these findings and the history,
Sir.
what do you think is the underlying reason for hypoglycemia? Let us start over there.
Right, sir. So,
First is, see, this is a 34-year-old mother who is giving breastfeeding plus 30 ml of feeding every 2 hourly. If the baby was feeding well on the mother's breast, do you think the baby can take 30 ml extra milk?
unlikely.
So what is the underlying problem?
So, could be feeding issue.
Lactation.
Lactation.
So it is quite possible that she is probably having less milk supply and the baby is not showing, not giving you adequate, not getting adequate volume. So we are giving a top-up feed. So to start with, let us start over there. But despite that, a baby who is at 3 months and 4 months again developed hypoglycemia, we cannot explain just on the basis that the baby is not getting enough milk.
That to sort of
What?
baby who's gaining weight.
And the baby is gaining weight, isn't it?
Yes.
So what else can go wrong? What else could be the reason for these hypoglycemias?
So then again, hyperinsulinism could be one of the causes for recurrent episodes of hypoglycemia. Persistent hyperinsulinic hypoglycemia of infancy is one of the differentials which I would like to keep in this case. Though there is no organomegaly which was present, sir, but still the possibility of IEMs like IEMs would still be there, sir.
Remember one thing.
Apart from
Congenital hyperinsulinism is a very violent disorder. It doesn't leave you quietly in between, like in your case. They are extremely difficult, highly resistant, violent hypoglycemic episodes, which literally chew up the brain by the time you are 3 or 4 months old. So it is extremely unlikely, Sarvesh, that this patient has congenital hyperinsulinemia.
That NICU would have required immediate reference that time only to the higher centers.
Yes.
Had it been hyperinsulinemia.
Correct.
Unless it is a level 3 NICU, they would have referred that time only.
So that is unlikely. Whereas your second diagnosis which you are entertaining, inborn error of metabolism, is still a possibility high on cards. Whenever there is mild infection or prolonged period of fasting, inborn errors of metabolism would present like this. So keep that in mind.
Yes.
So probably a defect in glycogenolysis or neoglucogenesis is what we are looking at rather than high insulin. Remember that if you have a high hyperinsulinemia, you are likely to need a very high glucose to correct that hypoglycemia.
Yes.
Babies might need central line, more than 12.5% dextrose, very high GIR. Unless that is done, hyperinsulinemia is not going to get corrected. And you can't have hyperinsulinemia which is episodic. It would still be a persistent hyperinsulinemia. How can you have a baby who is well for 2 months and then having hypoglycemia again well and then hypoglycemia? Unlikely.
Yes.
Then weight will be also would have been very good at birth, and thereafter also the weight would have shown the different progression had it been hyperinsulinemia.
Yes.
See, remember, insulin is an anabolic hormone. It not only makes you heavy, but also makes you long.
At this point, I would like to ask you one question: how to differentiate between the infant of a diabetic mother at birth clinically and from a LGA baby? A baby of 4 kg or 4.2 kg and an infant of diabetic mother of 4 kg. How to differentiate clinically?
So clinically, sir, infants of diabetic mother have predominantly the distribution of fat more towards the shoulder region, sir, as compared to a large for gestation age, which would be uniformly large, sir. Then hypertrichosis over the pinna, sir, is one of the signs which would be pointed to.
What else? Any more important? Generally, the insulin will act on the body and it will not act on the brain growth. So the head of the baby will be normal. As compared to the LGA baby, everything is proportionately grown. So if a 4.4 or 4.5 kg baby born to a hefty mother and father will have everything in proportion, head will be also large, body will be large. And in case of a diabetes, infant of a diabetic mother, the head will not grow to that extent as the body, because the brain growth is not dependent on the insulin. And insulin acts as a growth hormone for the body intrauterinely.
A big baby with adequate head or a big baby with relatively small head, which is actually a normal head, is something which goes in favor of an infant of a diabetic mother.
Yes.
Can you still have hyperinsulinemia if a baby is not a very big baby, but a small baby? IUGR or SGA babies, can you get a high insulin level?
Yes, sir.
Sarvesh, we know you're in second year, you're doing well. These are questions which are probably an exam going student can answer. So don't get depressed or nervous. We are trying to find out how much you know, not how much you don't know.
So in insulinomas, they can be smaller as well.
No, you can.
In SGAs, you can get hyperinsulinism without any insulinoma or without any defect in the channelopathies. So yes, SGAs are known to have a transient hyperinsulinemia. There's a group of SGA who have that.
Yes.
Okay. Carry on.
Sir, I've finished the case.
How will you go about now? Let's go discuss about how will you go about, because here and after clinically it is difficult to diagnose looking at your patient. We are used clinical skills of all the 4 people, so you cannot get to definitive.
You have ruled out major endocrine problems. You have ruled out hyperinsulinemia to some extent. You have ruled out infection, definitely. You have ruled out adrenal problems, definitely, because the baby has got good perfusion and no shock, no hypotension, no tachypnea, no acidosis clinically. You have ruled out organic acidemias to some extent, that the baby is growing well and there is no tachypnea during that episode of hypoglycemia. You have definitely told us that the child has got neurological sequelae related to hypoglycemia in the form of cortical visual impairment. Probably you have also told us that there is episode of hypoglycemia which is seen during feeding. So that tells us that the baby probably has a fasting hypoglycemia and not feeding related hypoglycemia. So you are taking us towards a gluconeogenic or a glycogenolytic defect to start with. So here we are in a 5-month-old child with recurrent episodes of hypoglycemia which are seen with some cortical visual impairment, and we are not sure whether the child entirely is neurologically normal, because it is very difficult to label a baby at 5 months that it is normal. I would definitely take a lot of salt before saying that this is normal. So let us not say that this baby is entirely normal. Maybe we need to have a follow-up rather than labeling it as normal at this point in time.
So, and I think from a pediatrician who is in intensive care or a neonatologist, what is the most important thing that people should have done in earlier admission, or we should do when we get an episode of hypoglycemia? Or Dr. Deshpande already mentioned.
Should set as critical samples. Sir.
Yes. So what is it? Tell us what is a critical sample and what all will you collect?
So for a critical sample, when the blood glucose level is less than 50 milligram per deciliter, sir, if it is spontaneously less than, or if we have to induce it by a prolonged fasting, what we have to send is we have to send the glucose levels. Along with that, we have to send the insulin and the C-peptide levels, growth hormone, and beta hydroxybutyrate levels and free fatty acid levels. Sir. Cortisol levels. Sir.
And if you can, always do a lactate and ammonia.
Sir.
And don't forget ketone bodies, because your primary dichotomy of
hypoglycemia told beta hydroxybutyrate.
Right. Okay. If you can do beta hydroxybutyrate, great. Otherwise, do at least a urinary. Yes. So yeah. Okay. Fine. And then when you have done that, what would you do next? Otherwise, what I'm asking is, what would be your thinking pathway, your flow chart to come to a diagnosis?
So we have to it's a with acidemia or without acidemia, and with ketonemia and without ketonemia, sir. Good. So that is how we have to go about it, sir. Sir, if the hypoglycemia is there is no acidemia and without ketonemia, sir, then and the lactates level which we see, sir, if the lactates are normal, sir, then it would be pointing more towards hyperinsulinism, whereas if the lactates are high, then it would point more towards disease like fatty acid oxidation defects, sir.
Remember one thing, the easiest way to remember hypoglycemia is first ketotic or non-ketotic.
Non-ketotic, sir. Yes, sir.
If it is non-ketotic, you only have 3 differentials. That side is very easy to remember. So it is hyperinsulinemia, beta oxidation defect, and galactosemia. So if your reducing substance is negative, then you have only 2 diagnoses: hyperinsulinemia and beta oxidation defect. If your free fatty acids are high, it is beta oxidation defect. If insulin is high, it is hyperinsulinemia. So that side is relatively easy. Now go to the other side. That is where there are a number of complications where you need the lactate, you need the pH of the blood, and you need the ammonia. So now tell us only that side, because then this side is easier.
So if there is acidemia, sir, and the ketones are increased, sir, it would go into the ketotic hypoglycemia, sir, or growth hormone and cortisol deficiency could be the causes, sir. But if it is the lactates are increased, sir, then the possibility metabolic disorders would be.
Yes.
Yeah. And ammonia, significance of ammonia?
Sir,
Any specific significant? What is HEHA syndrome? Do you know HEHA? Hyperinsulinemia, hyperammonemia, hypoglycemia syndrome. So always look at the ammonia, and that also will lead you to organic acidemias and other disorders. Hyperammonemia syndrome. So don't forget lactate and ammonia. I think you don't really need to go into the depth because hypoglycemia is not a simple topic at all. You are doing extremely well, and particularly when Dr. Sandeep mentioned you are in the second year, I think you are doing phenomenally well. So keep going, keep going.
Yeah, but we have to give the flow diagram to the. He has put it on the.
Okay.
Because for the benefit of the all others.
Yes. Have you got a slide on that? Have you got a slide on that?
Sir, if I may submit, sir,
Yes,
I
sir.
have a few slides. I have
Yes,
a few
sir,
slides
please.
on
After-
hypoglycemia after this discussion, sir.
Okay, okay. Sure, sure.
If required, I also have a presentation on that. If required. Okay.
Do we have the investigation
Go on
results
with
of this
your-
baby? Dr.
yes,
Sarvesh?
yes, sir.
So first of all, let us revise little bit when you are going to call hypoglycemia for the benefit of all the viewers.
Yes, sir.
Definitions. What are going to
Yes.
be definition? What is the working definition?
Yes, sir. In the early neonatal periods of to call it hypoglycemia within the first 4 hours, if the blood sugar level is less than 25 mg per deciliter, it is defined as hypoglycemia. And if it from 4 hours to 24 hours, if it is less than 35 milligram per deciliter, it is defined as hypoglycemia. Then it has to be subclassified into whether symptomatic or asymptomatic hypoglycemia. After that, beyond 48 hours of life, the hypoglycemia is less than 60 is what is said as to be hypoglycemia. But for a working diagnosis, we manage at less than 45 milligram per deciliter. So,
Okay. There is a divide between endocrinologist and the neonatologist there. Endocrinologists take the mean of whatever the observation is seen, and the neonatologists are on the lower third centile. They take third centile as a cutoff, and that's why there is a divide.
Yeah,
We
I
all
suppose
we all are,
sorry,
we all
Sandeep.
agree that hypoglycemia is ominous, and but
Yeah.
WHO and different organizations have put different numbers. But by and large, the operational threshold is that you
45.
should have a sugar which should be more than 50 in newborn, and after that it should be 60 or above. So I think
The only thing I want to add is for once you have suspected or confirmed the case of congenital hyperinsulinism, you should actually keep the glucose threshold a little
Yes.
higher because the rate
Yes.
at which it drops is so rapid, and the glucagon producing
70.
cells are also knocked off. So you have to be a little more careful with those patients.
For hyperinsulinemia, 70 should be target.
Yes, 60 to 70. Yep, absolutely.
so should I show the
Yes.
investigation, sir?
Yes, please. Yes.
So we had evaluated child with the venous blood gas, the tandem mass spectrometry, and GCMS weight cent, and the critical sample. This was the initial hemogram and the biochemistry, which was essentially normal. So, the pH was slightly towards the alkalotic side. Other than that, no significant anomalies there, sir. And this was the critical sample, sir. The insulin was 3.62 micro international units per ml, sir. The C-peptide was 0.8 nanogram per ml. The cortisol was 6.13 microgram per deciliter. Growth hormone was 3.77, and beta hydroxybutyrate was 0.27 millimoles per liter.
This is during hypoglycemia.
This was after an episode of hypoglycemia, which we documented a sugar level of 40 milligrams per deciliter.
So do you think that cortisol and GH is okay?
did you get a counter-regulatory response?
See, you expect a cortisol to be higher by nearly 4 times what you have got, and a GH at 4 months should go well past 10 nanogram per ml in hypoglycemia. So I think both your cortisol and growth hormone are low.
Sir.
And your insulin
Is not very high.
is not very high but measurable, which may itself be abnormal at this stage. And your beta hydroxybutyrate is again not at all 0, but it's not high either. Okay, right. Okay, carry on.
Tandem mass spectrometry in the urine gas chromatography mass spectrometry was also normal, sir.
Okay. Right.
So based on
Yeah, so one suggestion here before we can actually make a diagnosis of congenital hyperinsulinism, you require at least 2 samples of insulin values which are more than 2. Some people would say more than 5, but I think presence of insulin on 2 consecutive samples during hypoglycemia where insulin is present should give you a diagnosis. On a single estimation, I would still be a little wary. And especially without counter-regulatory hormone response. I mean, that is a bit of a puzzle. It's a well-known fact that if there are repeated hypoglycemias, then your cortisol may be temporarily knocked off. That is called as adrenal exhaustion. But your growth hormone should have gone beyond 10 for sure. So that other than, if you just show me this result of critical sample and ask me a differential diagnosis, I would first look at the pituitary and then look at the insulin.
Right.
So let's proceed. Yeah.
So apart from that, we've got a.
So
this
there was
was-
only one sample that we could take, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think that's a folly. You should have taken 2 samples. And one more thing, why did you do C-peptide?
Sir, C-peptide, normally we have to check to just differentiate it from.
But you are not giving insulin exogenous, isn't
Yes,
it?
sir. Yes, sir.
So there is no point in that.
So if you suspect Munchausen syndrome by proxy,
Yes,
you
sir.
would ask for a C-peptide. That's why earlier I was asking whether there is some diabetic in the family. Because we have recently had a case where the grandmother was actually injecting insulin and producing hypoglycemia in a little girl. And there the C-peptide and insulin had significant difference. The C-peptide was almost unrecordable and insulin was very high on 2 occasions. So C-peptide is primarily used to differentiate between Munchausen syndrome by proxy and genuine hyperinsulinemia. So here, I'm not sure whether C-peptide means anything because they are usually secreted in equimolar concentration, but C-peptide has a much higher, much longer half-life. Whereas here, what you see is that your insulin has come higher. So I wouldn't really buy this diagnosis unless I have one more insulin level here. Anyhow, carry on.
Have you done ammonia or anything else along with this?
Lactate ammonia is not done.
VBG showed a normal lactate, sir. Ammonia.
Ammonia you have not done.
No, sir.
Okay.
Whether in the NICU, baby sample is collected just during the convulsion or blood sugar level insulin?
Sir, at this point of time, the child was in the hospital and we were doing regular sugar monitoring, sir. So this point of time, the child was not symptomatic, but we identified hypoglycemic event on bedside monitoring, which was further confirmed on a venous sample, sir.
No, when the hypoglycemia was detected by blood sample, whether insulin was a water at that time also.
Why you require to
monitor
do,
insulin?
why you require to be doing ammonia in case of hyperinsulinemia? Which subset of patients will identify?
So organic acidemias.
No. There is one mutation which responds well to the drugs. Read about it.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. So how did you manage this child?
Sir, apart from keeping a diagnosis of congenital hyperinsulinemia, we had gone ahead and got a Dotter scan done for this child, sir, which showed a focal insulinoma in the tail of the pancreas, sir. So with that, sir, because of the unavailability of diazoxide, which started the child on octreotide, sir, somatostatin, at a dose of 10 micrograms given Q6 hourly, sir.
3 mics per kilo per dose.
No, sir. It's 2 mics per kg per dose, sir.
Per dose. Okay.
10 micrograms per
Right.
dose given 6 hourly, sir. So along with that, we had counseled the parents and about timely feedings with.
But see, your DOTA scan, do you have the image?
Yes, sir.
Can I have
Yes,
it?
sure, sir, sure, sir.
Okay. Because see, the course of hypoglycemia with an insulin or focal lesion is far more violent than what somehow presented in this patient. This DOTA PET was done here in Pune?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then why didn't you remove the pancreas? Because you had a focal lesion.
Sir, actually, the child is planned for a surgery, sir, and will get because of the pandemic, sir. The surgery had got delayed, sir.
Okay, and then because see, what you have got is actually speaking not an insulinoma. It's usually a focal lesion, and you should do before. I would strongly recommend before subjecting this kid to pancreatic surgery, you must send the sample for genetic workup of hyperinsulinemia.
We've done that, sir. The child has an ABCC8 mutation, sir.
But is that paternally inherited or it is homozygous? Or it is heterozygous? Because paternally inherited mutations will have focal. The other ones will not have. So I will only take that DOTA scan as positive if you have paternally inherited ABCC8 mutation. Do you know which parent has it got from?
Sir,
is that from Andrew Hattersley's lab in Exeter?
Sorry, sir.
The investigations were sent to Andrew Hattersley in Exeter in England?
Not sure, sir. Not sure, sir.
Because there are only two places where you can get it done, at Dr. Mohan's lab in Chennai or Exeter in England. If you look at that, then if it's in Exeter, then you would get which parent has it got from. Unless it's paternal, I don't think you should venture for surgery. You should do a repeat DOTA scan. I would definitely urge you to do one of these two before you subject the child to surgery, please.
Yes.
What do you want to repeat? Another thing? One is DOTA scan, another?
No, whether the inherited gene is from father or mother. Because only the paternally inherited ones are focal. Others are diffuse.
You again want a lab of insulin? You want?
Yes. That, I mean, ideally I wouldn't have done this unless there were two results of insulin really. But now that they have done it and they have found something, at least let us confirm this.
Yes.
And how much child is requiring it? Otherwise, glucose drip was requiring before putting him on the octreotide. What was the amount of glucose? GDR required before putting him on the octreotide?
No, sir. Actually, at this admission, when the child was admitted, the child did not require any. Was not on IV fluids for management. It was being managed with feeds only, sir.
I understand, Sarvesh, that you have done all this, but being a purist, I would strongly say that unless your GDR goes beyond 12, I wouldn't even think of doing this.
Yeah, exactly what I mean. Whenever we're looking at hyperinsulinemia or a baby with refractory hypoglycemia, the glucose infusion rate has to be more than 12 mg per kilo per minute. I mean,
Actually, according to all books, the investigations are to be done when it goes beyond 12 milligram.
Only if that's what I said, that I wouldn't have done any of this unless the GDR.
All the protocols, it is mentioned in the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And then many a times you do these fancy investigation and you do get some abnormality, but it's not necessarily pathology. Please remember this.
It could be an incidental finding. We
have to be more systematic before you subject any child to pancreatic surgery, for sure.
Because the morbidity and occasional mortality of the surgery is also, it is a focal. In diffuse disease, the mortality of the surgery itself is very big.
Horrible. 95% pancreas had to be chopped off, and it's such a difficult surgery at that age. So maybe my humble suggestion to you would be, please, when there is next hypoglycemia, repeat another insulin level. I would strongly recommend that you try and find the source of the found mutation, paternal or it is homozygous from both parents. And once you have a little clarity on this, then maybe please repeat a DOTA scan if required before you go on to surgery. That's for sure. I mean, that's my humble request to you, actually.
Yes, sir.
So if I can just submit, this
Yes, sir.
child had a first admission at our hospital at about 5 months, and we actually got much of this history only from the mother. The discharge documents did not really, tell us the complete monitoring after the admission. So yes, one possibility was that the hypoglycemia at the initial episode was significant. And even the ones that came to attention, the 3 month, the 4 month, probably these were the symptomatic ones which were brought to attention, and the other ones one really may have missed. That is one possibility. This mutation, sir, was a recessive mutation of the ABCC8. I would have to check back whether it's from the paternal or the maternal. But you're right. I think one critical sample we can definitely repeat.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, if the patient is, we are able to manage him without IV drip, then we have to think 10 times before doing any surgical intervention.
So this hospitalization when the child came to us, initially we had great difficulty in controlling the sugars with just the octreotide, and then it took us some time before we were able to fine-tune the octreotide dose, the feeding, and the child is euglycemic only after about a week of stay with us. So yes, maybe a repeat sample at another episode of documented hypoglycemia would help us clarify this, whether it's really a hyperinsulinemia.
But again, that would have been required to be off octreotide, no, Vaman?
Yes.
Off octreotide and hypoglycemia induction or natural hypoglycemia.
Yeah, I mean, many a times, this prolonged fasting somehow doesn't induce that hypoglycemia at all. It just, again, comes out of the blue. And that's the time when we have to take another insulin sample. Yes, I think I would go a little more cautiously in this case.
Whether baby received a steroid any time?
No, sir. The baby did not receive any steroids. So what we basically had was 3 documented episodes which were not really evaluated in its entirety. Probably this was the only significant episode that had come to attention. And when we got the child at 5 months, the baby did not have any metabolic acidosis. The lactates were normal. The TMS and GCMS were normal. And detectable insulin with a documented hypoglycemia, we thought. And then the DOTA scan kind of showed us a focal lesion. And so we are at this moment thinking that this is a focal insulinoma. But I think it's a very valid point. We probably need to repeat one more critical sample.
Yes, and also let's look at the mutational analysis again, actually.
Yes, I have that report. I just look back into it. It's a recessive mutation of the ABCC8. Whether it's a paternal or a maternal inheritance, we just look into it. Sir.
Okay, that would be great, actually, because it will really help in decision making.
Definitely.
Right. Great. I think that was a wonderful case. Very
nicely presented.
Very well worked up, and I think for a second year PG student, that was a very wonderful presentation.
He has
I
done
think
very well.
we need to thank the entire team for this very fruitful discussion. Very
The
fruitful.
presentation was online presentation.
Pardon?
Sarvesh, good presentation, excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Well done.
Thank you, sir.
So with your permission, just maybe 5-10 minutes. I have a few slides if I could
Please,
share.
sir.
Sure, please. Yeah.
Are the slides visible, sir?
Yes.
So I'm really grateful to the expert panel of Dr. Vaman, Dr. Anand Deshpande, Dr. Sandeep Kadam, and Dr. Sudeep and Dr. Kulkarni for bringing out so many important teaching points for our PGs. So just to summarize and maybe add a few finer points, the definition has actually gone a very, I would say, a full circle. Initially, the concept of the operational threshold was brought in by Conblar, and like Sarvesh pointed out, there is a difference in the way hypoglycemia definitions are given by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Pediatric Endocrine Society. AAP, the first 4 hours, identifies any value that is less than 25, and beyond the first 4 hours, in the first 24 hours, anything less than 35. But the Pediatric Endocrine Society in the first 48 hours says a value should be above 50, and beyond 48 hours, a value should be above 60. So the basic difference is AAP is looking at the transitional hypoglycemia in the initial 1 or 2 days, and probably the Pediatric Endocrine Society is looking at what could be a recurrent, severe, or a persistent hypoglycemia. And we all know these definitions have a large amount of fallacy and a lot of controversy. Primarily, the values I think have been chosen, cutoff values have been chosen to ensure a margin of safety of so-called the level at which one must intervene as a pediatrician to prevent what we know is long-term neurological damage. The nadir has been understood. After the baby is born, the umbilicus is severe, the cord is clamped. We have a nadir at about 2 hours of life, and then takes at least a 24 to 48 hour period before the sugar values stabilize. These values are definitely lower among the exclusively breastfed babies compared to formula-fed babies. And like Dr. Bauman has nicely pointed out, there is a very tight endocrinological control and a very beautiful fine-tuned mechanism which helps. So at birth, most babies have a low insulin and the counter-regulatory hormones pick up as the fetal or the maternal supply of glucose is interrupted. So what this does is basically decreases the peripheral utilization, increases both glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis, and increases lipolysis. So it is by around the 24-48 hour mark that we have some degree of euglycemia that is maintained. And normoglycemia would take about 24 to 48 hours in most healthy term babies. And like Dr. Deshpande rightly pointed out, 10% of normal babies, healthy term babies, can also have a transition hypoglycemia. The conundrum or the difficulty with hypoglycemia is because one really doesn't know, is it specific to hypoglycemia? Because signs and symptoms are very, very non-specific. Most often it is asymptomatic. And these signs and symptoms can range from, we all know, poor feeding, lethargy, sometimes irritability, tremors, jitteriness, high-pitched shrill cry, sometimes the adrenergic symptoms of sweating and tachycardia, not very common in newborns. Seizures are thought to be when there is severe recurrent or persistent hypoglycemia. And some of the neuroglycopenic symptoms mentioned also include hypotonia, limpness, cyanosis, and even apnea. So it's important to remember signs and symptoms are non-specific. Many babies can be asymptomatic. And this classic understanding of the symptoms matching the levels is more true, I think, for older children and adults. I would request Dr. Bauman sir's inputs and expert comments on this. And the classic understanding is that once the values come below 65 or 70, the adrenergic symptoms come in, and below 50, maybe the neuroglycopenic symptoms come in. But it's important also to remember there is no single pathognomonic sign or symptom, and the classic understanding of an adult Whipple's triad, wherein you demonstrate symptoms, you give the glucose, and these symptoms correct. So it may not always be met with neonatal hypoglycemia. At risk has been covered beautifully. We have the preterm, we have the small for gestational age or the IUGR baby. We have LGAs and also infants of diabetic mothers, and any mother who's on medications. This could range from beta blockers, this could range from other medicines like metformin, or any sick newborn can be prone. So the message is, if it's a symptomatic baby, you must think of hypoglycemia first. Causes, we understand that transitional hypoglycemia, the one that is most common, could either have inadequate stores or substrates for gluconeogenesis, and this is the common garden variety that we encounter in the newborn period, the premature, the SGA, the IUGR, or a perinatal stress, or polycythemia. The hyperinsulinism is what operates in an infant of diabetic mother. It's important to know that multifactorial etiology exists in most situations. It's not one cause in a given baby. There could be more than one cause. So a baby could just be hypothermic, feeding poorly, IUGR, having polycythemia, inadequate stores. So it could be multiple reasons operating in a given baby. And most of this transition hypoglycemia typically would resolve over the first 1 or 2 days, and definitely not beyond 72 hours. What persists beyond 72 hours, what is recurrent, what is severe, you must think of these other causes which have been elaborated so well. Again, hyperinsulinism is the cause in both CHI and the Beckwith-Wiedemann. could be endocrine problems, it could be inborn errors of metabolism. In at least the studies that have been done, almost 30 to 50% of these so-called at-risk newborns have had hypoglycemia. Most of this has been picked up on screening, and one today actually doesn't know what is a safe level. So there's really no single level which is considered to be safe, and monitoring is today's standard of care for these at-risk babies. How do you test point-of-care glucometers? A word of caution, it gives you quick results, it gives you rapid results with a very small quantity of blood, but these glucometers are not really designed to look for hypoglycemia, and so one must know that their values can vary from the actual plasma glucose, which is considered to be a gold standard, to as much as 15 milligrams. There is a classic schedule that we follow for these at-risk newborn babies, and they are more frequent on the first day, second day, and sometimes in the IUGR SDA babies, maybe even on the third day. In a sick newborn, you might do it a little more frequently. Confirming by a lab standard is always important. You would need to send a sample in the fluoride vial and have it processed quickly. Samples that don't have a glycolytic inhibitor or samples that are processed late can have erroneously low values of blood glucose as well. Protocols, different ones are followed. Some follow the AIMS, some follow the protocols that are given by WHO. Just a simple algorithm for the asymptomatic hypoglycemia to understand if the baby has values between 25 to 45 and is asymptomatic. The recommendation uniformly is a trial of breastfeeding or expressed breast milk, recheck after 1 hour. Then, depending on whether values improve or remain the same or decrease, one proceeds further. For symptomatic hypoglycemia, the recommendation is to give a IV 10% dextrose mini bolus of 2 ml per kg. It's important to note here that this bolus is just the beginning of a therapy. Many of us forget to begin the baby on a continuous glucose drip. So what this dextrose will do is probably stimulate further insulin release, and this baby must be on a GIR. Start with about 6 mg per kg per minute, recheck after 30, and then titrate depending on how the values go. It would normally take about a day or two for most hypoglycemia, which is the transitional hypoglycemia, to settle. Never interrupt the glucose infusion abruptly. Always ensure 2 lines and check that the preparation is prepared correctly in the NICU. Long-term outcomes, as have been brought out, we classically know that the hypoglycemia affects the posterior parietal and the occipital lobes, but there is sufficient literature to say that it affects the white matter, the cortical neuronal injury, globus pallidus, and also the thalamine. And it is the severe, the recurrent, the persistent, or the prolonged hypoglycemia, or the symptomatic hypoglycemia, that is known to have association with a host of these problems. It could be disability, it could be cerebral palsy, it could be blindness or epilepsy. And so one must be always cautious when you have one documented hypoglycemia and watch out. Persistent, as has been defined, is when you require a GIR of more than 12 mg per kg per minute, or one that is persistent beyond 7 days. The transient one, as we have said earlier, resolves over the first few days. Causes, we've already seen one of these 3 groups. And critical sample is again being discussed. It's to measure an insulin that is inappropriately high for a simultaneous low blood sugar. These are the common parameters that one would send. And the algorithm, like Sir has brought out, goes with initially the venous blood gas looking for metabolic acidosis, the ketone bodies, lactate, and depending on whether there is acidemia or no acidemia, one further goes and differentiates the various causes. CHI, we have just done a little literature review, and it is a very, very rare condition. It is either diffuse or the focal. Typically, diazoxide is the agent of first choice. In our baby, we were unable to procure diazoxide. It was not available easily, and that's why we went ahead with octreotide. Otherwise, a diazoxide responsiveness is considered to be one of the markers of one of these types. This is the typical picture of beta cell of pancreas, where these are the 2 channels which commonly are involved in these mutations, either the ABCC8 or the KCN11, and then one may consider surgery if you have a focal hyperinsulinoma. Our baby actually had 3 episodes of a documented hypoglycemia before coming to us, and we were able to show the critical sample with some detectable insulin. But yes, I think the point is well made, so that we probably need to repeat a critical sample before we really subject this baby to a surgery. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. And I'll request, sir, your Dr. Boman sir's inputs, Dr. Anand's inputs.
No, I think that's very good. If I could just share my screen just for a minute to just show you.
Yes, sir.
In Indian Pediatrics, there has been a very good article published, which is worth a read. And what I'm trying to show is from that article only. So I'll just try to share my screen. Just 1 second. Right. I suppose you could see my screen now.
No, it is. You have to read for us.
It's not very clear, I guess. Okay.
Not able to read it.
So primarily, when you do genetic studies for mutation analysis of ABCC8 and KCNJ11, then there is a dichotomy. Either you have a negative mutation or a paternal mutation. This is this arm. So if the mutation is negative or if it is of paternal origin, then you go down and do the 18F DOPA PET scan. So if it shows a focal disease, you remove the lesion. Rarely, even this variety may show a diffuse disease, in which case you are back to managing it medically. But here at the first dichotomy, when you have ABCC8 and KCNJ11 tested, and if it is either homozygous or compound heterozygous, then you try to manage it medically. And as a last resort, you go on to do total pancreatectomy or near total. So I think this one step of where the mutation is coming from is going to be decisive if we confirm in one more sample that it is hyperinsulinemia. Now, this article is published in Indian Pediatrics, and I could perhaps put it on Pune IIP's website if you want. WhatsApp. So it would be very easy to share, actually. I'll do that. I'll do that right away, actually.
This is your article?
No. This is written by Khalid Hussain, who is now a consultant at Great Ormond Street. Khalid and I were actually together as senior registrars in 95, 96. But Khalid has actually written the United Kingdom guideline for congenital hyperinsulinism, and it is abstract from that.
So anybody can highlight about the drug mechanism, either Vaman yourself or Dr. Sridhar, if you have. It is very interesting for the students to know. It is quite how insulin works normally. That if you can highlight for in 5 minutes how the beta cell works, how insulin glucose enters. It is very interesting to learn from you.
But that's a presentation in itself, because now there are so many ramifications of that, that it's just not going to stop at sulfonylurea and KIR genes. Actually, we might do it a little later. But generally what you're asking is primarily insulin is very tightly governed because there is a sensing mechanism. There is a glucose sensing mechanism in pancreas. And based on the level of glucose, either your channels become leaky or they become tightly closed. The channels, when the blood sugar level rises, they become leaky and insulin comes out of the islet cell of pancreas. When the glucose is low, the channels become tighter. Now, the way to control that are what we are talking about: ABCC8, KCNJ11, various genes. And now there are 7 more genes which actually are known to control this mechanism, which is through sulfonylurea receptors or through the KIR pathway. Now, diazoxide, a drug like diazoxide, works at the sulfonylurea receptors, whereas your octreotide, lanreotide, these would act at the other channels. So these are the basic mechanisms. In the past, it was also thought that because there is a calcium channel involved, whether nifedipine will also work on it. But surprisingly, nifedipine has failed to control any hyperglycemia. That is in a nutshell, actually.
Okay.
But absolutely wonderful. And thank you, the team, for Dr. Sridhar and the team for making this effort, presenting this wonderful case. And I think we had a very fruitful discussion. Dr. Anand's comment and, of course, Dr. Sandeep's comment were immensely useful. And I think we should have more of these cases discussed, so we all become wiser, actually.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of FMC, the Department of Pediatrics, thanking the entire team of IIB Pune, sir, and the experts and panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to thank Pune IIP, Dr. Nathu, Dr. Madhu, all of you who have been doing this wonderful effort. Thank you and bye for now. Bye-bye.
Thanks, sir. Now, to sir, conclude करा.